Time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Hey folks, let me ask you a question. How many of you and your families have been touched by people who have been using drugs? I'm sure you or your family or people that you know of, those people who have been using drugs or got involved with the drugs, you see the devastation that happens not only with them but with their families. On today's show, I have Mary Ann Feno, who is the Vice President and COO, Chief Operating Officer of Serento Gardens. And we'll talk about a couple things about prevention. And it's we talk about this all the time: education, 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 and trying to just bring as much information to you as possible. But for those of you who know how devastating it is and what happens, you have young people who are so in the prime of their lives doing so well, and all of a sudden someone gets them hooked on drugs, and you see what happens, and all of a sudden families are torn apart. There's so much grief that goes on. Thank God we have places like Serento Gardens, and thanks God we have people who are there to help. And today, folks, primarily we're going to talk about prevention. Okay, prevention. And I would highly recommend that you call your friends up or any of your family members and watch the show. We're on 24/7, as you know, on our website. The show can be seen anywhere. So if you have friends in Arizona or whatever that has been going through this process, prevention is prevention. It doesn't only apply here in northeastern Pennsylvania. So with that being said, Mary Ann, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Sammy, for having me.
As I said before, first let me congratulate you and your staff at Serento Gardens for doing such a fabulous job. Even though funding has been cut, why in God's name that has happened, I have no idea. Most important part, I think, anyway, federal government, cut the funds, I understand, in 2010. But first of all, being involved in this every day as a chief operating officer, how prevalent is the problem of drugs in northeastern Pennsylvania right now?
It's prevalent. I think there are some people that are in denial. We did a key survey 2 years ago, and I was surprised when the results came back from the Hazleton area. And we sent the survey out to many people, a lot of professionals, a lot of elderly people, young people, teachers. And I was surprised at how naive they are regarding the prevalence of drugs in our area. I was really surprised. We have a serious problem in the Hazleton and the Northeast area, a serious problem. As we talked earlier, there were 2 overdoses recently. I mean, that's part of this disease. There's always in the paper where someone is arrested for possession or paraphernalia. It's here. It's here, and it's worse than it was 20 years ago.
Why do you think, Mary? I mean,
why?
Yeah, why do you think?
First of all, I like to look at it as supply and demand. Okay, if you look at supply and demand, if there is a demand for a product, people are going to react to that by bringing the product to where the demand is, right? Okay, so you look at where we're located in Hazleton. We have 80 and 81. Okay, so transportation, just getting into the city to buy it. New York City is not that far away. So they're bringing it into our community. Okay, so they have the means to get it here because of where we're located, best area in northeastern Pennsylvania, and also we don't have the police forces any longer. Now, if you would read the papers and you see where a lot of the drug activity is, it's in the small outlying areas. Hazleton does have its problem, but we're looking at McAdoo, we're looking at Berwick, we're looking at West Hazleton, Weatherly, where there are Freeland, small concentration of police forces. So drug dealers are coming into the area. They're dealing because they know that they can get away with it longer.
But let's go back to the start. The only reason why you have a supply is because someone's buying this.
Yes, the demand.
So, okay, so let's go back to where, what ages, and I'll tell you, Mary Ann, the society today, these young people they're getting bombarded all the time, okay? Unfortunately, parents and guardians cannot spend the quality time that they need to spend with their children because of the demands of their work.
Yes.
Okay, society puts so much strain on us that we cannot have those dinners. We cannot, we fight as much as we can. And I feel, and I say shame on the parents who do have time and don't spend the time with their children. Because there's enough parents that wish they had that time or guardians to spend that time. And they paid a price for it later on in years. So with that being said, It has to start somewhere, okay? Somewhere has to start. You know, you look at TV shows today, you look at the movies today, and you actually see them smoking pot, smoking dope, and it seems like it's nothing wrong with it. They portray that as nothing wrong with it. So these kids are thinking, you know, especially even the comedians. Jay Leno will come out and make a big joke about marijuana and about cocaine and laugh about it, etc. And Letterman will do that, and all the, you know, so it's like, you know, especially MTV, they'll see all this stuff about drugs, and it's like a common thing. Till they get hooked, until the sorrows happen. So what do we do about that, Mary Ann?
Well, it does start with the family. Okay, we're talking about risk factors. There are risk factors and there are protective factors. Okay, and risk factors are what would make us more vulnerable to drug addiction. Okay, we can look at genetics. Genetics is there's a predisposition for addiction, just like there is for heart disease, cancer, diabetes. Okay, what happens if you have a parent or a grandparent who's had heart disease, diabetes? Okay, if you want to be responsible, you're going to watch your diet, you're going to get exercise, you're going to take precautions against getting the disease. Unfortunately, even though people do take the precautions, sometimes they get the disease anyway. Drug addiction is no different. There is a genetic predisposition. Okay, there is the family history, the culture, the values. We see a lot of adolescents coming in where drug use is condoned or allowed in the home. Parents are using themselves. Now, that's a minority, so I don't want to say that because there are a lot of good families out there who do everything right. You know, they may both work, but they do spend that quality time, and their children get addicted. Their children do use drugs, and they do abuse them. You know, so we can't say this person's wrong and that person's right. Every child is at risk, every child, but not every child abuses drugs and alcohol. Okay, so what we have to look at, how could we maximize our protective factors, okay, and how can we eliminate or reduce our risk factors? Okay, you start at home. Setting boundaries is the very first thing. Children, when children are young, I mean, most parents will set boundaries. First of all, they're there for them. They meet their basic needs. Their needs would be food, clothing, and shelter. Okay, they meet those needs, they're there for them. So if the parent is responsible and is there, the child feels secure. Okay, then we go out through the years, and if a child is acting out, the terrible twos, perfect example. What do we do with the terrible twos? We set our boundaries. We start learning what they can do and what they can't do. The no, you know, no is appropriate. What do children learn? First thing is no, right? So we're building. It's a tiered effect. So we're building on one stage of childhood after another, okay? And then I notice that probably I'm hearing more teachers asking for help in kindergarten. And they're asking for help because a child is having a behavioral problem or a child is acting out. Okay, that's the first indication that there may be a problem here that we need to address. Delayed gratification, self-control, okay, how to deal with when you don't get what you want, tantrums. That's the basics. Okay, how do we delay gratification? You just said that. You know, this is a fast-paced society. You know, adolescents want things today. You know, when we were growing up, you got presents on your birthday and Christmas. Today, how many adolescents have cell phones? How many have cars? I mean, it's a different day. Okay, so delayed gratification isn't here. They want them now.
And the other factor what you're talking about is, you know, we grew up whole differently than today. And I say this before, the strains on society, the fact that, you know, both parents have to work, guardians have to work, and believe me, I'm sure they much rather spend time with their children. But however, the time that they do spend, okay, where the education and finding out what that child is doing,
right?
Because it has to start somewhere. Because then they go to school and their peers come involved.
That's right.
Especially if you have a bad apple in the group. Okay, folks, I'm talking to Mary Ann Feno, who is the vice president and COO of Serento Gardens. Now, folks, the annual appeal, the Serento Gardens annual appeal, and I'm playing this show in the Pottsville area, and say hi to all my friends in the Pottsville area. Because this affects everyone. That's why I said it's on the website. But Serento Gardens has an annual appeal, and you know, it's they would really appreciate whatever you can donate to them, because as you know, the funding's been cut. And like I said, for those of you who have been touched by people or family members who are unfortunately got involved with drugs, it gets even worse. But let's go back and talk about prevention, which we will. But what about the legalization of marijuana? We have a lot of questions about this. You know, is that really a stepping stone for going into higher drugs, or is it just something you just have and is it separate, okay? We'll be back, we'll discuss some of those things and more on prevention, which is the key, folks. So I highly recommend telling your friends, call up your friends, watch the show, because Mary Ann has a lot of great suggestions when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks, 24/7 on SSPTV.com. My email, sam@ssptv.com. My guest today, Mary Ann Feno, who is the Vice President and COO of Serento Gardens in the greater Hazleton area. We're talking about drugs and prevention of drugs. Going back to the risk factors, okay, there are environmental concerns too as well. Right. And the whole process here, again, is the prevention.
Right.
But it has to start somewhere,
right.
Okay? It has to start in the home where that kid is, that child is, and start from an early age, correct? Yes. So let's start about what do we do as parents right now, or guardians, or who is ever taking care of young people. What is the environmental factor here? Well,
the first environmental factor is, parents are models. Children will imitate the parent. So if you have a parent who is abusing drugs or alcohol, and I include alcohol in that, and a child sees that, or cigarette smoking, the child is going to look at it as appropriate or normal, okay, no matter what type of household it is. So they have to model appropriate behavior, okay? The second one is communication and bonding, spending time. Like you said, there are many parents that have to work. There are many single-parent homes. There are mothers and fathers who are single parents, so they're juggling both roles. And some don't have, family members, grandparents, or uncles or aunts to help shoulder the burden. So they're doing this on their own. Okay, but they still need to keep that communication open. Talk to their children, know what's going on, know who their friends are. Have their children come over to the house when they're little for play dates. I mean, you remember those days when you would have a sleepover and you knew everyone's parent. You knew who these children were. Today, I think because parents are out of the house more because they're working, and they're working different shifts. A lot of parents are working 12-hour shifts. How can you be around if you're working a 12-hour shift and give the best care you can for your child? You need to know where your child is and who they're with, okay? So it starts young. Know who their play dates are when they're little, if you will. Okay, teach them about boundaries. Set appropriate consequences, age appropriate. If a child has the rules and understands the rules, and the rules are clear and concise, okay, and the child does something that goes against the rules, they get an age-appropriate consequence, and something simple. Talk to them about why that happened. Problem solve. Teach them how to problem solve. I have found throughout the years with working with adolescents, they don't know how to problem solve. They don't know how to problem solve. They do not know how to deal with their emotions and their communication. And a lot of times they will use drugs to alter their feelings, to escape from a world that they don't know how to deal with or problem solve. Education is very important. Reading, okay? Teach your child how to read. Read early with your child. Get them to love reading and learning. Many of the students who fail in the early years, okay, and I'm talking about 1st and 2nd grade, okay, they're set up now. They're set up because they failed, they don't feel good about themselves, and they are put in a group with other children that are experiencing the same problems. They're finding their niche, and oftentimes some of these children end up doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Maybe they're the class clown, maybe they're someone who's going to smoke a cigarette behind the building, start that way, start taking sips out of their dad's drink or their mom's drink, whatever the case may be. They didn't find their niche with the normal kids, if you will, the children who are achieving in class, so they're going to find a subgroup, a subculture, where they can feel that they fit in.
How many parents, there should be a class on how to become a parent sometimes, because parents want to become friends to their children, okay, and that's the problem. They're not friends to their children, they're parents. And sometimes when they have so much pressure on them, they just give in. Okay, give them this, okay, but give them this. And instead of saying that no and being a parent, it's called tough love. No one liked, with my children, it was very difficult to yell at them, and you pray for the best. But I mean, sometimes you have to be tough love. And some parents just don't want to do that. they just don't want to get involved because it begins into a conflict. Then it becomes a teaching program because why mom, why dad?
Right.
Now we have to get into the explaining of that, and that's where the key is.
Right. And well, that as well as if there are two parents in the home, adolescents or young children are very good at splitting them.
Well,
go to your mom, go to your dad.
Well, and that's even this. That's so sad. See, we pay the consequences in life no matter what we do. So these parents who think they're getting away, or if the father's watching a football game, go and see your mother. I don't have time for you. Or if the mother's watching a soap opera, go and see your father. Go see your grandmother. Do this, and they push things off. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then when something happens, it's my child. It can't be my child. Are you kidding? Well, all of a sudden it's like. The fingers start pointing. It's right. The teacher. It's their friends. It's the people down the street. It's and what happens is instead of pointing back to saying I'm the problem as the parent. I should be doing my job as a parent. And it's a tough road. It is a tough road. It is tough, and to parent as a unit. And then if you have parents who are divorced, to get them to parent as a unit is also difficult. It does start with the parenting. Now, understand, Sammy, there are a lot of adolescents who come from great homes that have done everything right, and they still get involved with drugs or alcohol. When I was teaching, I saw the same thing. Parents that were great, did wonderful things for their children, and they got involved. I understand that, but I think that's a small majority. It's there, you know, and they need to be recognized for that, but that's where the peers come in then. Mm-hmm. Okay, so once your child goes to school, the first day you put that child on the bus or you put that backpack on them, and then they are not just part of your world, they're part of a larger world where there's more influences. You know, how do you feel, we're going to talk about marijuana in a minute, but how do you feel about, there's always a shock treatment, okay? Mm-hmm. When people see, when you do this, they had accidents sometimes. The kids, some high school kids, they'll show a car smashed up, okay, and they'll do a make-believe scenery, and there's the people laying out, and they're all full of blood, etc. And when you look at it, you say, oh my God, ooh, and the state cop or the policeman will say, this is what happens when you drink and drive. Right. Now it's like in my mind, okay, but when you have drugs, sometimes if you... It's sad because the shock treatment is when you see a person who's been using drugs, cocaine, heroin, and you see what happened to them, and you look at that person and say, this is what you could become. Mm-hmm. This is what happens to you. How many of these young people are dying today because of overdose? They had to start somewhere, Mary Ann. Right. Someone had to influence them, whether it was a movie, whether it was a TV show, whether it was something influenced them, and there was no one saying to them, slapping their hand saying, don't do that. Right. Well, the thing about with adolescents particularly, you can show them the gory scene. You can talk to them about it, but many of them don't believe it's going to happen to them. That happens to somebody else. Yeah. There's always a reason why that happened. It's not going to happen to me. Yeah. But, it's the little things. Like you said, underage drinking parties. Parents are still allowing them. Still allowing underage. And their thought is if they're not leaving the house, if they're staying here, they're safe because they're not driving. They want to be friends again. They want to be the good parent on the block. So bring your friends here and you can drink here, but you can stay. I still hear that. What are you teaching your child? First of all, you're teaching your child that they don't have to obey the rules because the law is 21. So you're telling them don't obey the 21, okay? Which then goes, well, why do I have to obey that? Well, maybe I'll just do something different that's illegal. If I didn't have to obey the rules of 21, I don't have to obey all the rules because mom said that I don't have to. How do you feel about legalization of marijuana? I'm against it. Mm-hmm. I am against it. I do believe that marijuana is a gateway drug. Mm-hmm. I do believe that. I believe that the legalization of marijuana for medicinal purposes is unnecessary because there is Marinol out there. You differ from your Yes, your I leader. Do. We do, and we do differ. I mean, he has his viewpoint. Ed does have his viewpoint. We don't always agree on everything, okay? But that's his personal viewpoint, and this is my personal viewpoint, is that I believe that there are other drugs out there that can alleviate the pain and discomfort of disease. Okay? Nothing more than having the experience like you have and you seeing this every day. Exactly. So you see what happens when these young people or adolescents or adults come in. There had to be a starting point, okay? Yes. Of 100% of the people that you have seen or who come into Serento Gardens, how many of that percentage you think started with marijuana? 75% or more. I will indefinitely hold to that. It just blows my mind, folks. Yep. Isn't it amazing? It's a gateway drug. I'm talking to Mary Ann Feno, who is the Vice President COO of Serento Gardens. Folks, as you can see, they need as much education as possible. I'm going to come back a little bit more. Serento Gardens Annual Appeal. If you can make a check out to them, it would be great. Their website is serentogardens.org, and their phone number is 455-9902. Nothing like prevention and education. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us, folks. I'm Sam Lesante, and my guest is Mary Ann Feno, who is the Vice President and COO of Serento Gardens. We're talking about drugs, prevention of drugs. I guess let's go back to the positive parenting. What are some of the things that parents and guardians, or whoever's ever watching the show, can get out of the show about drugs right now?
There are 5 points, I believe. One is communication, effective communication. And that means if there is a problem in the house with your child, you're not going to scream and you're not going to holler. You're going to find a quiet place. You're going to control your emotions. You're going to sit down and you're going to talk to your child about what's going on. You're going to keep that communication open. The most important thing is that you do not embarrass your child or put your child down. You do not, ridicule them for their opinions. Let them have their opinions. Let them have their values. You can talk to them sensibly about that, okay? The second one, I think, is negotiations. Negotiations is, let's find a problem, let's solve it together. Okay, instead of just saying, do it my way because I said so. Okay, that's effective to a certain extent. But let's look at the problem, let's take it apart, and let's come up with some solutions, maybe part of your solution and part of my solution, and we can compromise. Okay, a third one would be, help me out there.
Setting limits?
Setting limits. Setting limits are rules, basic your rules. We are governed, hopefully, by rules in society. I always believe parenting is a matter of raising your child so they can become a productive member of society. So if you have rules age appropriate in your home and you build on them as they get older, the child then will go out into society and will be a productive, law-abiding citizen. That's the goal of parenting.
The other thing, we got a minute and a half, and I want you to stress, know your children's friends.
Know your children's friends. Know whose house they're going to. Do not be afraid to call the parent.
Oh, yes.
And ask the parent, is Johnny there tonight? Because he told me he's sleeping over. You have no idea how many parents do not know where their child is. The minute they leave that house, of course they have their cell phone. And of course they're going to be able to reach them wherever that cell phone is. It doesn't have to be at their friend's house. It could be at someone else's house. Know your children's friends. That's where they are often getting their drugs, from their peers. That's where their supplier may be, or friend of their supplier.
Question is this: when your children, question them. What did you do today? Start that communication going, so you know what your children are doing, and show that you're interested.
Be involved.
Now, you said something, and Mary Ann, I'm going to have you back, okay, because I think there's a lot more to be told here. But you said something about marijuana. Folks, she said something of 100% of the people that come into Serento Gardens. I asked her how many people started with using marijuana as a gateway drug. She said 75%. Well, if we're logical and we're going to do something about legalizing, and why don't we go to a number of organizations in the country, like Serento Gardens, and find out from the people who deal with these drug people every day, how did you start using drugs? And if you find out that 75 or 80% of them started by using marijuana, and we see the drug problem we have today, why do we want to legalize marijuana? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me if that's the case. Mary Ann, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank
you. The annual appeal, folks, please help them out. They need all the help they can get. All my friends in the greater Pottsville area as well. The Serento Gardens annual appeal. It's on the screen, serentogardens.org, 455-9902. I definitely will have Mary Ann back doing part 2 of prevention. But pay attention to your kids. Pay attention to what's happening, because we pay the price later on. We'll see you next time.